Hi, I'm Robert. Welcome to my channel. This is a reading of my latest book, My Nineveh, The Cross Between Psychedelics and the Church. It is available now on Amazon. If you want to support my work, please like and subscribe, and consider purchasing a copy from the link in the description below. Chapter 16, The Bible. Many people view the Bible as a holy, God-breathed text. I happen to share that view, but my understanding of it is a bit different than most. For example, I do not believe it is the only text of that sort in the world. I hold the Gitas and the Vedas in a similar light, as well as other less well-known works like The Cloud of Unknowing. These sorts of inspired texts all have one thing in common. The writers, or in the case of the Gospels, the person written about, Jesus, have contact with God through an altered state of consciousness. Many of these altered state experiences are written down about in the Bible, and certainly they cause changes that alter the course of history. Not all of them have a fully non-dual component to them, but they all peek into the other side of reality and pierce the veil of amnesia. Moses, the author of the Torah, received his divine appointment as leader of the people of Israel directly from God in a classical mystical experience. That event is recorded in Exodus chapter 3, in the story of Moses at the burning bush. Whether the burning bush was a physical object Moses saw in the external world, or a deeper metaphor for Moses' egoic self which burned away but was not consumed, language very reminiscent of ego-death experiences, the culminating event was a direct contact with God as I am. The interesting thing that almost everyone who reads the passage notices is that the statement I am also applies to ourselves. There is nothing we know more about ourselves through basic inquiry than I exist, or I am. Descartes famously said, cogito ergo sum, which translates to, I think, therefore I am. But in that moment, he missed the mark. It is not the act of thinking through which we know our own existence. Rather, it is the experience of knowing I am that is prior to thought. Immediately, thought labels that experience and takes credit for it, which is part of the ego's job in creating reality. But knowing of I am takes priority over labeling it, thinking about it. If we happen to be in another form, like that of a fish or an insect, there would still be the experience of being, even if we are unable to think about it at all. To the mystic, this direct knowing of I am is the experience of God directly, prior to ego. There is something that survives the ego dying, and it is known to be divine. Of course, none of the Bible would be written, or the millions of lives changed from the Judeo-Christian tradition, if it wasn't for Moses having a direct experience of I am. That is the power of these altered states. Moses encodes in the book of Genesis the method by which creation happens. That method is one of division, descending away from the non-dual unity of consciousness of, in the beginning, God. Everything is a develop of more and more duality, light and dark, day and night, heaven and earth, water and land. This division and multiplicity of concepts continues with plants, fish, birds, and all kinds of animals. The crown jewel of this creation is humankind. Even here, the continual duality is stressed with male and female as divine opposites. Man is described as the duality of the stuff of earth, made of ground, and the breath of life. Man's first job in the garden after being created was again one of division. Adam was given the job of classifying and labeling the animals. This job is tied to how our left brain functions. It creates hierarchies of order to classify the things we find in the world around us. It is ultimately this very capacity of our minds to divide that caused the very trap we find ourselves in the fall of Genesis 3. In the story of the fall, we see the promise to be like God, knowing good and evil. This is, in a sense, the ultimate in duality, the trap that pushes us further and further into the dream. The Bible is very clear about the nature of God in reality, that he is the one creating the stories, guiding lives, and has everything under control. However, as soon as we declare that we know good and evil, we begin a process of identification and judgment. We begin to chase those things we label good, and we resist and reject those things we label as evil. This creates desires and aversions in us, and our minds are troubled when the things we chase after die. Rather than accept reality for what it is on its own terms, we suffer because we wish it to be another way. This is thorns and thistles among the crops and pain in childbirth. We labor because things are not as we desire them to be. In the Eastern traditions, there's a story about a wise farmer and the foolish villagers that illustrates this type of good and evil thinking. It goes something like this. There was once a farmer who had a son and a horse. One day, the horse ran away. The villagers came by saying, "Oh, what an evil thing has befallen you." To which the farmer replied, "We'll see." The next day the horse returned, followed by 7 wild horses, which the farmer was able to capture. The villagers again came by, saying, "Oh, what a fortunate gift of the gods." To which the farmer again said, "We'll see." On the 3rd day, the farmer's son was riding one of the wild horses in the process of taming it. He fell and broke his leg. Again, the villagers came to the farmer saying, "Oh, what an unfortunate thing has befallen you, such evil." To which the farmer predictably replied, "We shall see." On the 4th day, representatives from the king came around to conscript all the able-bodied young men to go fight the war. All the young men in the village were conscripted, except for the farmer's son, who was not wanted due to his broken leg. The villagers came around to the farmer again, declaring on this day how fortunate the leg break was. The wise farmer again said, "We will see." The moral of this story is that our egos are quite sure we know what is good and what is evil, but we do so from a position of ignorance from within the story. We are so impressed with our own moral intuitions about how things ought to be that we become like God. We see this exact sentiment mirrored later on in Genesis 50, verse 20, in the story of Joseph and his reunion with his brothers. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive." Rather than live like animals, able to accept reality however it is, without dividing it into good and evil, or desirable and undesirable, making this division comes with curses. We see so much of the world now in an undesirable state, and then must expend effort to make it desirable. How many people get frustrated and angered at a problem, say a plumbing issue they're working on? That emotion comes from a place of not accepting reality as it is. We are frustrated that we must work to fix reality or suffer under its natural processes. The examples given in the Bible are childbirth, which no other animal fears but causes us to suffer immensely, and the cursed ground which we must toil at for our food. No other creature plants or harvests. Reality provides for them with no work on their part, but our capacity to plan for the future causes reality to become harsh and unforgiving. The primary mark of this fall is the introduction of clothing into the human species. We are still the only species on the planet that wears clothing out of habit. The act of covering ourselves is a symbol that we no longer see reality as it is, but rather are stuck in the world of seeing the illusion and form. We do not even see ourselves as we are when we look in the mirror. Everything is covered for the vast majority of our existence. At the same time, clothing acts as a help in muting and controlling our desires, which keeps us manifest in this world. Our desiring to know good and evil creates anxiety. This anxiety has a cure laid out in Matthew 6, verses 25 to 33. "For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life, as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body, as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the sky, that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather crops into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more important than they? And which of you, by worrying, can add a single day to his lifespan? And why are you worried about clothing? Notice how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor, nor do they spin thread for cloth. Yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you? You of little faith, do not worry then, saying, what are we to eat, or what are we to drink, or what are we to wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things, for your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided to you. This remedy is the inverse of the curse of the fall, and it is a psychological fix. God created his creation good, and that includes all the cycles of birth and death. There is no remedy for that. It is already good. Rather, to undo the fall is to undo our judgments about the nature of reality. It is those judgments of ourselves and others that lead us to hate and despair. It is the unmaking of the judging mind that brings us in alignment with God. This biblical teaching is mirrored in Buddhist teaching, which identifies attachment or desire as the cause of suffering. One might say that the cause of the curse laid out in Genesis 3. Buddhism correctly identifies that everything in this universe is part of a cycle of birth through death. And when we identify with the desire a permanence of these forms, we will inevitably suffer when they go through their period of death. This suffering is often well beyond what we might consider grief, which is natural and a good part of our existence. The emotions of grief are a powerful tool of transformation. It is similar to plowing the field so that something new can be planted. However, the suffering that both Buddhism and Christianity rectify is the suffering we feel due to our attachments. When my brother Tom committed suicide, there was a grief process that everyone who knew him had to undergo. His time had come, according to the schedule laid out by divine appointment, and in the manner also divinely appointed, not an hour too soon or too late. Was it up to Robert in those moments to hold the creator of the universe to judgment in Tom's death? Not only would such a thing be futile, but that bitterness and my own lack of understanding would only create more suffering. Insofar as this book is a result of Tom's death, and insofar as this book helps others, that is looking with heaven's eyes on creation. Our misguided moral intuitions and warped knowledge of good and evil cause us to judge others in very harmful ways. I think of all the well-meaning Christians who have broken apart their own families due to the various sins they find especially offensive, rather than leave those judgments up to God. One of the most common judgments is that of non-Christians who are outside the tribe. They have the wrong belief, the wrong theology, the wrong relationships. If only they would become like me and my tribe, then things would be better. This, of course, goes directly against how Jesus taught with the example of his life. He was the friend of sinners, and did not demand that they become like him to earn that friendship. Of course, being a friend with someone completely aware of their divinity does change lives. But those changes happen due to the loving influence, not as a demand given as a prerequisite to relationship. The Bible exists as a book from God to God, lost in the division and illusion of being a human. It is the roadmap of how this dream came to be, and the steps one must take to find their way back to the dreamer. It does this by highlighting all the pitfalls of the ego which keep us trapped on this side of the veil.